time and they'll double their land. That's Betty Lou, Ridge's eldest. Smart as a whip. A man's got a right to be proud of a girl like Betty Lou. Well, that was the McDowell family one evening not long ago. But there's one thing that has no regard for all the time and effort a man may put into his home and his land. But fire did more than destroy McDowell's property. It hurt his loved ones. In town, the McDowell fire caused quite a shock. Folks couldn't figure it out, how something like that could happen to a careful man like Ridge McDowell. What started that fire? A few days later, I decided to find out for myself. The McDowells had moved in with Ridge's cousin, Luke Simmons. I was lucky to find Ridge alone. But the minute I went in, I was sorry I'd come. He offered me a chair. Then I asked him how his little girl was, Betty Lou.
Well, she's all right, I guess. But her hands. You know, I've been burning brush for years, and I never had no trouble.
Got any idea what happened, Ridge?
Funny. One day you got a home, you got fields, timber, a future. The next? Well, the next.
I got out of there as fast as I could. That wasn't the time to get Ridge to talk. Brush fires. I've seen a good many of them get out of hand, all through these woods of ours. Folks seldom knew how they started. But when you look back, fit the pieces together, more often than not, you could put your finger on it. I recollect a couple of years ago, well, you wouldn't think that this tract, 250 acres timber, could be traced back to such a simple thing. A washpot fire. But that's what happened. All because time and trouble wasn't taken to rake around the coals of that washpot fire before leaving. Just a little old washpot fire. Take Manning Lowry. He figured by burning a strip of grass around his cotton field, he'd rid himself of boll weevil. He didn't bother to build a fire line. Well, Lowry did get rid of his grass. And he got rid of his woods. His neighbors, too. The only thing he didn't get rid of was the boll weevil, still snug and safe in the cotton patch. Wilson Bailey had the reputation of being the most putting-it-off man in the county, and not without reason. Bailey wanted to clear off a piece of new ground, but all through winter he kept putting it off. December, January, February, March. It was then Wilson Bailey decided to burn. His fire burned good, and with no fire line, it burned even better. Where Wilson Bailey failed to provide a fire line, nature did. The river. Wildfires. You can trace them back to a number of causes, but most frequent's the weather. I recollect Tom Mason. He practiced all the rules about caution against fire. He had a right big farm, kind of a show place in his county. Took a lot of pride in keeping it up. His land butted onto that of Charlie Stone. Been good neighbors for 20 years. Mason had a patch of run-down land he aimed to plant to pines, with the valuable help of his little boy. But one day, Charlie Stone decided to burn a ditch bank. Figured the weather was right. But the wind doesn't sound an alarm before it switches around. And fire has no regard for man's boundary lines. Too bad. But on that day, Tom Mason was in town. Left his wife and boy alone on the farm.
Got away from me.
Yep. Tom Mason practiced all the rules about caution against fires. Wherever there's a fire, there's always a cause. And the McDowell fire was no exception. I'd heard McDowell had gone back to his land, spring planting. That bug was still buzzing around in my mind, wouldn't let go. What started that fire? Hard work was doing Ridge good. He looked more like his old self, talkative too. In time, I steered him around to the day of the fire.
You know, I still think about that. Keeps going over in my mind, every step I took that day.
Suppose you tell me about it, Ridge.
Well, there's not much to tell. A couple of days before, I was fixing to burn in a field of sedge grass. I recollect it was a quiet day. No wind to speak of. I had Sam Lewis plow a good wide fire line around that field. It's a pretty big field, you know, so I had Sam plow an extra line down the middle. Then burned it off against the wind. That night I recollected rain, so the next day I figured was a good time to burn my brush. In the morning I plowed my fire line. In the afternoon, Jim Gibson, he come over to give me a hand. We burned them off without no trouble at all. Finished up just for supper time. Lucky we did, because a wind came up. I recollect feeling mighty good that we were through with the burning. It was then that Betty Lou came down from the house to meet me, like she always does when I come in from the field.
Well, that was McDowell's story. But I knew then what had happened. In burning brush safely, picking the right weather's about the most important thing. Burn early in the wet season, long before spring plowing time. Plow a good wide fire line around the field. 3 or more furrows. The wider, the better. Then build small piles. They're safer because they don't get as hot as the big ones. Time to burn is after a good rain, when the ground is damp and the wind quiet. Before you burn, let the ranger or fire warden know and tell your neighbors. Then get them to give you a hand. They'll have the tools just in case. An axe, fork and rake, swatter, shovel, and of course, water. Burn when the sun begins to go down and the cool, damp evening comes on. Less chance for a fire to get away. Burning against the wind means a slower fire. Staying with the pile before lighting the next is insurance that a fire won't get out of hand. Feed a fire gradually. It'll be easier to control. And double insurance against wildfire is a good, wide fire line. Last comes mopping up, policing up the area, and making sure your fire's out. And that's where Ridge McDowell made his mistake. Every step right but the last. Not taking time to make a thorough check before he left. That evening, a gale had come up, sent sparks into the grass, jumped his fire line into the woods, then to his house. What he should have done was finished the job. A man can never be too sure, for a fire that's not dead out means danger to his loved ones and his property. In the last 20 years, thousands of acres of timber have made possible a new and vigorous industry for the South. Pulpwood for all kinds of products the whole country needs. Lumber for building up our homes and our industry. That'll mean a prosperous and growing South for all of us to enjoy. But there are hundreds of well-meaning folks like Wilson Bailey, like Manning Lowry, Charlie Stone, and many a home like Ridge McDowell's. Last year, over 5,500 forest fires in the South were caused by brush fires alone, a loss of over $25 million. Money out of all of our pockets, loss of thousands of jobs for our men folks. Not to mention the loss of young growth, seedlings that someday might have contributed to the strength of the South. These are our woods, woods for our children and their children to work in, to live in, enjoy. Timber that is tied up with the economic growth of the South. Timber that tells us that we're moving onward, building toward a stronger and better future. Yet, a timber cruiser gets around. I've worked these woods of ours, I guess, a good many years. And you know, they're kind of nice. Let's keep them that way, huh?